Before we get going though, does anybody have any questions about anything so far? It's good.
One of the windows supposed to be on the roof for the homework assignment, so I didn't do it. It's W11.
Oh, it's supposed to be up higher?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So for the imbue, so they're just taller essentially. So we'll need maybe another level up there. Is that okay?
Yeah, and one of in the beginning we start the wall height. It was I think 10. You said we may change it.
Uh-huh.
So one of the doors with the window above is 12. So I changed the wall height.
Okay. I think we have. I'm trying to remember the assignment. Did we have? I thought we had one more level above that though, don't we? We have a 10-foot and then like a 16-foot one for the roof. Is that right?
It was 15. Yeah.
15? Okay. So I'll look at the clear story and just make sure that they're all lining up. Okay, sounds good. Any trouble though getting any of your doors and windows in there at all?
Just the window shapes.
Yeah?
So,
Oh,
like
yeah.
you said, we will
And we'll get there. And yeah, another tool might be a little better for that. Yep.
Can you show us now again? You said that you could change how wide the door opens to like 45.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you show us?
Well, that's an easy one, right? Yes. So, well, let me say this. So it's going to be a parameter that's built into the door, and more than likely it'll be in most door families. But if you were looking for it and maybe it's missing in some specialty door that you downloaded, they may not have included it, right? But if you click on the door itself, your properties dialog box over here, this one shows a swing angle. So if I type 45, enter, then it will change the swing. But that is something that you build into the family, so it may not occur in all of the door types.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, one thing I do want to point out, so just a couple of quick things. So you all know how to navigate using your project browser over here, right? So if we double click on level 1, we're in level 1. If we come over here and we double click on east, then we're in the east elevation, right? So that all makes sense. But one thing I want to show you too is that you can navigate within your drawing board here as well, okay? And we don't have a lot of things like sections or call outs to navigate with, but we do have these elevation markers, okay? And I just want to show you that this is one really great thing about Revit is a lot of the annotation markers are interactive, all right? So for example, I can come in here and if I click on the head of that marker, a blue line appears, and if I drag that blue line around, that will sort of position the elevation line for that elevation marker, which means that this elevation goes, and we don't have any grips on here, but essentially, because they're being cropped, but this elevation goes from here all the way to here, right? So anything from this point forward will be shown on an elevation, okay? And what that means is that, let's get an elevation view. I'm going to show you how to navigate to the elevation using these markers. I'm going to click, double click really fast, and it navigates to that elevation, okay? I'm going to WT window tile. I'm going to put my elevation on one side. That's super annoying, right? Oop, they're all locked. Oh, I must have locked I locked them in floor plan view and now they don't want to move in elevation. I'll come back to that. But what I wanted to show you is what that means is that if this line happens to come down and engage the floor plan, look what happens over here, right? It essentially becomes a section because you are now touching the floor plan instead of viewing it from afar. So it's showing you a wall assembly being cut and showing you the windows back here beyond, right? So this blue line, it essentially tells you where the field of depth for that elevation starts, right? Maybe it's 15, whatever this distance is, like 20 feet from the building, okay? And if you click on the head of any one of these markers, you're going to see that same thing happening, okay? Right. So we don't have a lot of annotation in here just yet, but I do want to show you quickly without knowing how to do these, right? Annotation meaning like I don't have a dimension, or a section marker. But if I did happen to put a section marker, if I want to go to that section, I click on the section marker, and I navigate right to that section. Okay, so we're not there yet, but I just wanted to show you. Annotation is interactive in Revit, so most of the time if there is like a section, an elevation marker, a detail callout, if you double click on it, then it will take you to that view, okay? Which I think next time when we get together, we're gonna talk about how to place views on sheets. That comment will make a little bit more sense. All right. Okay, so let's talk about what we're gonna talk about today, which is annotation. So we're taking a little break from actually drawing. You know how to create walls, you know how to create doors and windows, right, which is important. You know how to structure those, meaning you know how to add vertical levels and, you know, and assign your walls and doors and windows, or define them according to those levels, I guess I should say. But I want to just kind of go off the topic of geometry creation, and I want to show you how to add some geometry, and also the next time we meet, how to print, right? So we can quickly add dimensions and text. I'm going to show you how to tag a few things pretty quickly. And then so that we know how to print and print to scale, I'm going to show you how to create a sheet and how to add views to those sheets so you can print things, all right? And then next week, let's go back to our schedule here. So next week we'll talk about, I think we're going to start talking about floors. Hold on one second. Hold on, let's see. October already, okay. Yeah, so we have text, and then we'll talk about printing, drawing management. Oh, yep, floors. So we'll get into floors, ceilings, roofs, and each day will just be a separate topic, right? We'll kind of cruise through building elements very quickly after this. But before I begin, I have to run and get a tissue. Sorry, guys, real quick. Pause. All right. Here we go. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is kind of just a little overview of annotation. All right, so when I say the term annotation, basically annotation, you know, you have your drawing elements in Revit, things like doors, walls, windows. But annotation gives description to those items. Okay, so we have building elements, and then we use annotation to describe those building elements in your drawings. So the word annotation includes things like dimensions, right? That's annotation. And text or keynotes are annotation, or text notes, or leaders with text, okay? All of those things are annotation. So they add description in some way or another to your building elements. Okay, so that's what the term, when I say annotation, that's what that means. Another thing I want to say about annotation is that it's view specific. So what that means, and this is going to be something that's going to be the bane of your existence, but also the best thing in the world about Revit. What that means is that if I add dimensions or text or leader notes in one drawing, right, floor plan level 1, and then I go, well, this might be a bad example, but I don't think it's going to be. Then I go to level 2. No, it's good. Okay. You see that annotation or those dimensions are not appearing there, right? And the reasoning behind that is because on different drawings, you may want to show the same like floor plan and grids, but you may want to show different description or call out different things, okay? So annotation, text notes, keynotes, leaders, dimensions, different things like that, and they are all view specific. So that means if I create dimensions on this level 1 drawing in this view, right, of my model, and then I double click over here on another level, the dimensions that were very clearly across this grid, and this grid exists in, it's the same grid, exists in level 1 and 2, right? Those dimensions don't appear, okay? All right, I'm gonna go back to level 1 here. So let's talk about, first I think we are going to talk about dimensions, but I'm just going to bring over a little graphic here. This is in our course manual, right? And this is showing some of the different types of dimension, right? So this right here, this is called a leader with text. So a leader with text has a little arrow, it points to an object in your drawing, and then the text describes it, wall. And text notes only, just text, right? We type it out. And it doesn't have a leader. It's just informative about the drawing in general. It doesn't point to anything specific. We have dimensions. So this is a dimension, okay? This is also a dimension. And dimensions give, they give lengths and widths, and they sort of quantify things in your drawings, right? So these are kind of the 3 different types of annotation we're going to talk about today. Okay. And the first thing I want to talk about is dimensions. And you guys sort of know a little bit about dimensions just because dimensions help you draw things. But I want to formally talk about dimensions, their parts, about how you can change how you dimension to and from things, and a little bit more about how you can help use them to help you draw, essentially. Okay. So if I go over here to the Annotate tab up here, all you AutoCAD, I mean, you guys are probably already loving dimensions as they are in Revit. Just wait till we get to text. All you AutoCAD users are going to love it. But let's talk about the different types of dimensions we have first. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 different types of dimensions. And really kind of the main 2 I'll focus on will be aligned and linear, right? We also have some specialty ones like angular, radial, diameter, arc length. But these are all really not used a ton. And once you know how to use the first 2, then the last few make a whole lot of sense, okay? Dimensions are made up of a few different parts, okay? We have the actual dimension in text format, right? And what that means is that from this point, which is called the architectural tick, that's an architectural tick, from this point to this point is 4 feet, okay? So here's our text dimension telling us a reading, it's 4 feet. The architectural tick, that shows the beginning and the end of a dimension segment, okay? And this one, it's a little bit hard to see. Let me do a dimension where I can see the lines. There we go. Or maybe like this, even better. Okay. So we have the actual dimension. We have the ticks, which start and stop the dimension. Right here, we have what is called oh no, I'm blanking. What is it? The dimension line? Let me guess on that one. These are the extension lines. That's dimension line. keep wanting to say baseline, but that doesn't sound right. I think we're going to call it the dimension line. Unless I come to the right term, but that's not popping up as correct either. Baseline. Nope. Anyway. So this is where we'll call it the dimension line. We've got our extension lines, our architectural tick, and we have kind of a gap in between the object that we're dimensioning and where the extension line begins. Okay, so really the dimensions are all kind of have the same parts as they do like in AutoCAD, right? We see all the same things. If I click on a dimension, all right, I want to show you we have some little grips that appear. So we have a little grip here on the extension line, and if I click on it and I hold it, this will allow me to move it to something else. If I touch that and it turns blue and I let go, you see how the dimension changes, right? Bring it to there. There we go. All right, I'm going to undo that real quick. This right here, if I click and hold on the end, it will allow me to shorten or lengthen that extension line. So I can click and hold and drag it to something else, or I can click and hold and change the depth of, or I guess the length of it, right? There's also a grip on the dimension text, okay? And if I click and hold that, I can move the text back and forth. Oh my gosh, look all you AutoCADers, look at that leader that forms with it, how nicely that forms. Looks nice, right? But a leader does form. Now if I have this dimension selected, I have the option up here to turn my leader off if I want. So I can uncheck that or check it, right? And my leader turns on and off. But I do have the ability to kind of move the text around if I need to. I also have a little lock here. And I feel the same way locking dimensions as I do about other building elements, and that is I used to lock them a lot, and then I realized that things got over constrained and it caused more problems than it was worth, right? So unless a dimension is extremely, extremely important, I don't lock them anymore because I think the constraints cause more trouble sometimes than they're worth. But we are able to move the text around, okay? You'll also notice that this is in feet and inches, right? So that's great. I'll show you how to change, the rounding of that and change a few different things about that. But it is in feet and inches by default. Okay. So those are all the different pieces of the dimension. Let's talk about how we create some dimensions. All right. All right, so I'm going to come up here. The two that I'm going to go over mostly today will be aligned and linear, and then the specialty ones we'll touch on, but once you know the first two, the last few are just really easy to create, okay? So an aligned dimension, and this gives a little graphic, which is great. When I use an aligned dimension, the dimension is in complete alignment with the angle of the object you're dimensioning, right? So if I create an aligned dimension, actually, let me create a wall that's slightly askew here. We'll drag that out. Trim, TR, there we go. Okay. So if I create an aligned dimension, I can click on aligned, okay? It's going to, if I come down here to my little shortened command line down here, select the reference, then click an empty space to place a dimension. So if I want to create an aligned dimension, let me just do a little, I'm trying to find a corner here. This is not the best example, I think, maybe. Hold on, let me do one. Well, we'll just try and make this work. Sorry, guys. Pull this back. There we go. Okay. Oh, I'm trying to get my little corner there. Oh, it's terrible. Oh, there it is. I'm tabbing to pick different things on the wall to dimension. And I just want to show you what these look like. So I'm trying to pick that little point right there, which I finally was able to get by tabbing. I'm going to click, and then I'm going to come down to this little point down here. Hopefully I can tab, tab, tab. Grab that little point, okay? And what I wanted to show you here is that these two are in alignment as far as their angle. So I click once, I click a second time, I click in space, click, and my dimension is finished. Okay, so that's an aligned dimension. It aligns with the object you are trying to dimension. Okay. Now, if I wanted to create a linear dimension, I'm going to click on linear. Linear creates a straight or a linear dimension regardless of the angle of the object you're dimensioning. So if I click on linear, and hopefully I can grab the same point. There we go. There's one. There's two, right? You see that it will only pull a straight dimension. So regardless, if I come over here and try and get it to follow the same angle like that first dimension did, it's not going to work. Click in space and I place that dimension. Okay, so an angular dimension follows the angle, and a linear dimension creates a more of a constrained dimension, but just a straight linear dimension. Okay, so it's like creating something with ortho on, where it will only create 90-degree angles. I'm going to hit undo. I'm just going to go back to my straight walls. There we go. So when I dimension things, by default, I very rarely pick anything but aligned. And I do that because I can still create a linear dimension with aligned, right? I just draw it straight instead of aligning it with other objects, okay? I like aligned also because I can DI, and that's the hand shortcut for an aligned dimension. So I can click on DI, and I get my aligned dimension command initiated, and I'm able to dimension, all right? Okay, so I'm going to click on aligned. Before I start dimensioning, I want to talk about a few settings, all right? And kind of the main setting I want to talk about here is where we're going to choose to dimension things to. And you're going to notice by default this says wall faces. Yours might say something different. But what that means is that when I hover next to an object, the first thing it's going to sense is the face of the wall. As I move through the wall, it does pick the center line. But if I move over to the other side of the wall, you notice it defaults to the face of the wall. Okay, now that's different from core, center of core. So if I hover near my wall, it's going to go to the center of the core, right? Core meaning structure. And my stud is the structure on this wall. And my stud, you're thinking, well, this is, I don't remember what that is actually. I'm tempted to say block, but I don't know if I defined it that way. But you could say, well, there's CMU block over here or whatever. Well, it's going to default to however in the wall assembly you define the structure. Okay, so now it's going to default to the structure. If I change it to wall center line, now it's going to calculate how thick this wall assembly is, and it's going to pick the middle, right? So there's a few different ways that you can choose to dimension. I kind of like to choose wall faces, because I like that it sort of defaults to an edge, right? I don't like it picking some weird point in the center of the wall or the core, because I just don't always remember how those things are defined, okay? So I can choose to choose the wall face, but if I don't want the wall face and I don't want the center line, I can also choose tab, tab, tab. Do you see how it goes through all? Let me zoom in there. Tab, face of drywall, tab, center line, tab again, drywall. I was picking up the other side of the drywall there, I thought for a second. Tab, there we go. There's the other side of the drywall, right? I can tab, I can grab that face of the plywood, tab, right? So I get a lot of freedom with choosing where I want to, you know, pick the first line of my dimension, but I can also then come over to the object and I can tab, tab, and I can really kind of pick where I want that dimension to be taken from, okay? So don't forget about tab. Tab, let go, and I just cycle through them, all right? To place a dimension, I'm going to click, move in the direction I want to go, click on my second object, click, and I can just keep going. Click. These are, it's a continuous command. They chain, right? So I can click, click, but the second I want to stop, I just go into space, right? There's nothing there, and I click in nowhere land, and it finishes that string of dimensions. I feel like it's really satisfying to just like draw this entire nice string of dimensions, right? Especially because it's so easy in AutoCAD. I mean, it's not that terrible in AutoCAD, but this is way easier, right? So I like to do these wonderful, long, very lined up, nice strings of dimensions. But what is good and bad about that is it's good because it's all cohesive, right? But what's bad about that is if I have to delete one of these dimensions, if one goes, they all go, right? So I've gotten into the habit of doing one or two stopping, one or two stopping, one or two stopping, so that if I have to delete them, then it's not a big issue. And you could say, well, I can edit the extension lines, the witness lines. I can do that. So I can come here, right? And I get this middle line. I can grab this and I can move it to something else if I want. But I can't always get that to go exactly where I want, right? Just my experience. A lot of times it's like I get it pretty close to where I need it to go, but then it messes up another dimension in that process, and so I end up deleting it anyway, right? So when you're creating dimensions, they're wonderful, they're super easy, but if you create a long string, you'll have to delete it if you make a mistake, okay? So I'm going to delete these real quick here. I'm just going to draw a couple more. Linear, same thing. Let's see, what did I just do? Linear, there we go. It's odd. Huh. It's not allowing me to choose where I want it to go to. Well, we'll just pick up a spot. That's really weird. We're getting some weirdness here. So it's still, this linear one is acting a little bit funny for some reason. Let me think about it for a second here. It's only allowing me to kind of pick on like edges of objects. I don't think I've messed around with this one, so I wouldn't think that it would be messed up for me using the file. Let's start it. I'm going to start a brand new file here real quick. I'm going to test this out. New project. Okay. Just draw a couple of walls here. Linear. So something has changed a little bit. References. Okay. So it looks like the linear ones are a little bit different in this newer version. It's asking me to select references, linear, but I have to pick them kind of on the object. So that makes me not like linear even more, right? So I can pick edges. See that? But it's just not acting as nicely. So I'm pressing tab to get those points, but I don't really like that functionality. Tab, tab, tab. So it's allowing me to pick on the object, but not, it's not allowing me to be as specific to choose like the wall face, the wall core, just like the aligned, which again, I don't really like as much. In previous versions, it was more like the aligned. Maybe they're trying to more differentiate it, I guess, from aligned, but anyway. So the linear is going to be straight. You're going to have to pick points on objects, it looks like now. We have angular. Angular will allow me to measure an angle. Really easy. Click on angular, right? And I click on one thing, I click on a second thing, and I get an angle. Okay, and it doesn't matter what angle it is. If this is angled all the way out here, angular, click once, click a second time, I get my angle, right? And I not only get that angle on that side, I get this angle over here, right? So I can change it depending on whatever I want to measure, okay? We've got radial, so let me draw a little circular wall here. Wall. I'm going to create a circular wall. It's terrible, right? And radial, I click on radial. I hover over here. It's going to give me the radius of this. Click once, right? I'm going to do it again. Click once on the outer wall. You see how it highlighted that, right? Or I could click wherever I wanted on the wall. Again, I have the option of choosing wherever I want that to go. Right, wall faces. I hover, I click in space, and there's my radius. It's wonderful. And then I have my diameter. Click, and diameter will do the same measurement essentially as the radius, but it will give me a full circle diameter there. Okay. All right. So pretty easy. I don't use diameter a whole lot. I mean, because I like, you can get the same sort of dimensional quality or accuracy, maybe, with the radius that you can with the full diameter, but this takes up less space on my page, right? Less annotation to be going all the way across my drawings here. So we're going to worry about aligned, linear, angular, radial, and diameter, right? Very rarely, I use these every now and again. I use angular every now and again. I think by far, and I think I said this before, but I use the align dimension the most, right? And it's just the most versatile. It has a great keyboard shortcut, and so those are the ones that I use the most. All right, any questions about any of those dimensions so far? Really easy to use. I want to talk about sort of means and methods. Let's bring that back the way it was. I'm going to delete a few of these. Delete, 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 delete. Okay, for sure delete this guy. Delete that. It's terrible. Okay, so it looks pretty good. I'm going to click on aligned here. And let's see here. I want to talk about stacking dimensions. All right. So one really nice, really easy thing in Revit about dimensions is that I can start creating them, right? I'm just kind of taking them across these grid lines, clicking, 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 ending that. Oh, I forgot one. Click, click. You notice that if I move down towards those dimensions, I get a very clear snap, so they line up, right? Click and space, and it finishes. What's really nice about Revit is that I can also stack and create baseline dimensions very easily. So if I wanted to create another string of dimensions above this, click, click, and if I bring it down, you'll feel a snap, right? So that dimension, click, I finish it, gives a really nice baseline spacing here, all right? And that's something that you specify in the dimension properties, which we'll talk about next. But it's really easy, click, click, and you'll feel it with your mouse. When you get close, it snaps, click, and you get that exact spacing that you want between those dimensions. I click, I'm going to go all the way down here, click again, you see it snap, very clearly snaps, click again, and I get another really nice baseline dimension, right? So one of my favorite things about Revit, I get that really nice, easy baseline snap. Now, we do get that in AutoCAD, but I feel like it gets out of control, right? You create one baseline and it just keeps wanting to stack them one on the other. Not a huge deal, but a little inconvenient, right? Okay. So baselining dimensions, great. I want to talk about dimension properties next, right? So how do we make the text look like this? How do we change, maybe if we want the architectural tick to look a little bit different? What if we want to change the rounding on our dimension so that it doesn't round to, 5/16 of an inch or whatever? I want to talk about that, okay? All right. So, and I'm going to say this a lot during this class, but just like a lot of other things in Revit, dimensions have a style associated with them, and that's where all of these definitions occur, right? So there's types, dimension types, not styles. I scared you there for a second, didn't I? AutoCAD. But we have wall types, we have door types, we have window types, we also have dimension types, all right? And if I click on a dimension and I come over here to my properties dialog box, you're going to notice that I have a linear 3/32 of an inch aerial text dimension selected. That's what I'm using. That's the style or the type of dimension I'm using. While my dimension is selected, if I drop this down, I could change it to, let's see if we can get something different, text height. These are all pretty similar. I'm gonna create a new style because all of these are really they're 3/32 aerial, okay? But we'll create a new style in a second. If I hit edit type, right, just like I would when I create a new wall type, I'm brought into the type properties dialog box, okay? And a dimension type is similar to maybe more like a door or a window type in that when I hit edit type on the properties dialog box, all of the different properties are immediately showed to me for that dimension style. And I say that because like a wall type, you have to hit edit type, edit structure, and then edit the structure in that dialog box. Where a window or a dimension, you click on the object, you hit edit type, and all of its characteristics are immediately shown, okay? Okay, so you're going to see a lot of things that are associated with dimensions. Things like, what kind of leader type do you want? Do you want it to be an arc, or do you want it to be a line, right? So when there was a leader associated with this, do you want it to nicely arc or be a line? Tick mark, how big is it? It's an 1/8 inch, bless you. It's an 1/8 inch diagonal. Okay, what is the line weight of my dimension? The dimension line extension, you know, from the object to the extension line, what is that distance? We have a lot of different things. I'm not going to go over every single one because really very rarely, I don't think if ever, I've really changed any of these settings in this first graphics area, right? I think one of the nice things about Revit is that you can almost use it just right out of the box, right? There's a few minor settings you change, but you get Revit, you open it up, you start using it essentially, right? You don't have to change a bunch of pen weights. You don't have to change the dimension style. You might have to change how it rounds. You might have to change, you know, do I want an arrow leader or a dot? But in general, all these things function pretty well. What I am interested in is maybe the text type, right? Maybe I don't want Arial. Maybe my company uses New Roman Times or whatever, a different type of text, right? So I'm going to go down and maybe try and find that. So maybe the width factor of my text is narrower, right? Maybe I want to make it 0.80 instead of 1. Maybe I want it underlined or italic or bold, right? Maybe the text size needs to be different. Maybe I don't want Arial, but I want, you know, whatever that is. Yep.
Text size is that, so is that printed height?
Printed height. Yes. So there's no more in AutoCAD where you're like, oh, I want it to be an 1/8 inch tall printed, so that means it's 10 feet tall in model space, right? No more of that. Yeah. So 3/32 printed height. That means when you put it on a sheet to print, that's how tall it will print regardless of what scale it's at. Okay. So I can change the text. You'll notice that the text background shows opaque right now. That means that if there were a hatch behind this, that there would be a little white little region behind the text that would mask out the hatch behind it so that the text isn't obscured by the hatch behind it. And here we have unit format. All right, well, this is where I get to decide if I want to round my dimensions differently. So if I click here, you'll notice that I have a choice as to how I want this to work. I can go to my project units, which are kind of the global units for the entire project, right? And I can change the rounding or the settings, or I can change just this dimension type. So if right now it says round to the nearest 1/32 of an inch, which is pretty extreme, I could change this to the nearest 1/4 of an inch. Okay, hit OK. And now instead of saying, I don't see one here, but if you have a weird dimension like 2'4" and 1/19, right? It's not a thing, but if it was, it would round it up to the nearest, what I change it to, 1/4 inch, right? That wouldn't mean that it corrects it. That doesn't mean that it actually changes the dimension, right? It just rounds that number to the nearest 1/4 inch. So those are going to be things that I kind of look for. Like I said, I don't change anything up here, but I do change kind of some of the aesthetic things I want to change down here. All right. Now I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to just show you how I broke the rules a little.
Sorry, so just
Yep.
by changing it, does that, with the walls, does that destroy the original? Do you need to do a duplicate? Or
Oh, yes. Yeah, and that's what I was just going to say. Me with the dimension style. Yes, it does. So I was just going to say, let me show you what it does. Hit OK. And what I've just done is I've changed that original style, right? So I made a mistake. I shouldn't have been changing things in there. What I should have done, I'm going to hit undo, is I should have created a duplicate text style, right, or type to make my changes to, right? Just like a wall type, if I click on this and I hit, you know, edit type to linear 3/32, if I change all of these things and I hit OK, it changes the original when I don't really want to be doing that, right? I want to make a duplicate, change the duplicate, and then use it, all right? So again, this is just like walls, this is just like doors, this is just like windows. It will be just like floors and roofs and ceilings. I'm going to click on the dimension to create a brand new dimensions type or style. I'm going to hit edit type. I'm going to duplicate it and give it a new name. So maybe we want this to be 1/4 inch century Gothic. Okay, hit OK. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to change this to century Gothic, and we'll change it to the height. Where is my height? Size, right there. 1/4 inch. And I'm going to look at my rounding and say, I don't really want this to be 1/32 of an inch, but I don't really want to change the whole system settings, because there might be things, and maybe I'm detailing like millwork or something where you might want that precision. So I don't change the whole global system of rounding. I'm just going to uncheck that and change this dimension style. We'll change it to 1/4 inch, hit OK, OK again, right? And now I have a new dimension style. Right? It's as easy as that. So if you're asked to, and you will be in your assignment, to create a few new dimension styles, that's how you're going to do it, right? You do it just like you would a new wall. So you edit the type, you duplicate it, you rename it, and redefine it, essentially. So now if I wanted to use that elsewhere, okay, aligned, instead of 3/32 inch Arial, I'm going to choose my century Gothic. And now it's printed, the printed height of that will be, I have 1/4 inch. There we go. Okay, and that's printed height. That means that when I put it on a sheet, it prints at 1/4 inch, right? What that also means, what's really nice about Revit, is if I change the scale of my drawing from 1/4 to like a 1/2 inch, it scales it for me. Isn't that wonderful? And that still means that this will be 1/4 inch when it's printed, even though you saw it flex and it looks smaller, right? Revit is just making it the right size in our drawing space so that when it prints, it's 1/4 inch, okay? So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. The system works. You don't even have to double check it. In AutoCAD, sometimes I'm double checking these things because I'm like, AutoCAD has a mind of its own sometimes. I want to make sure everything's right. But in Revit, I've never had an issue with it. Okay. Any questions on creating a new dimension style? All right. Let's talk about the text on our dimensions, because here's probably, if you were to ask people who use Revit, like maybe a sort of an annoying thing that they don't like about Revit. And one of the annoying things about Revit is that you can't cheat the system, right? There were all sorts of ways to cheat the system in AutoCAD, right? If you created a dimension, you wanted to change it to be from 9 foot to 9.5 inch, and you didn't want to redimension everything, you would just double click on the text and type in 9 foot 1/2 inch, and it would take it. So it would just change the text of the dimension, even though it wasn't right. Revit is a little smarter than that. If I double click on the text, I am allowed to change how things read on the text, okay? But I'm not allowed to change the number to, like, let's see, if I choose replace with text. So instead of using the actual value, I want to change it, and I want to say 9 foot and 1/2 inch. And I say apply. Revit's smart and says, hey, you can't do that, right? You can't cheat the system. And let me just remind you, I got here by double clicking on this, click, click, really fast, and I'm allowed to come here. So you have to get a little crafty, right? So if you are working with drawings and you always see like or equal or something after the fact, right? That works, which is really nice, right? So we've kind of found ways around it. You just have to find some text that will match that dimension so that it works, essentially. But what is nice is I'm allowed to add text. So you could say something like dimension to grid, right? Above the dimension line. Below we could say if you want to, right? So you can add some descriptive text above. Oh, gid, if you want to, right? I can add a suffix or a prefix to the number. I'm going to delete those. If I have use actual value, I'm allowed to add a prefix or a suffix. So prefix, and we'll show suffix. There we go. Okay, so if you're doing some type of dimensioning that needs a little bit of description. All right, So any questions about dimensions so far? They're not terrible, right? Very, very easy to use. I can double click on that again, and if I wanted to, I could sort of delete that. Hit OK, and there we go. Okay. All right, let's see. Oh, one thing I do want to say. I'm going to copy this grid over here very closely. There we go. One of my biggest pet peeves about AutoCAD that they still haven't fixed after, I don't know, 30 versions, right, is the fact that when I create a dimension that is, well, okay, let's make it, that is too small, right, to fit between the objects it's dimensioning. I don't like that in AutoCAD I can't pull it off to the side and have a nice little leader, right? But in Revit, as you saw, I can click on this little, and I can drag it over there. Oh, look how nice that little leader is. It's beautiful, right? I don't like the 0 foot out in front of it. That's another dimension style setting. So I'm going to click on the style and hit Edit Type. That is in my rounding dialog box here, my unit format. Suppress 0 feet. That's a good one to check. Okay, okay, look how nice it looks, right? So my nice little leader, it's been solved in Revit. Again, you know, all of these dimensions actually have a leader associated with them, unless you uncheck leader right there, right? Then it goes away, okay? One more thing I want to remind you of is these are view specific. So I've created all of these dimensions and spent all this time in floor plan level 1. If I go to a different floor plan, they're not there, right? So now if I wanted to create the same set of dimensions here, I would have to come in, initiate the dimension command, right? Pick the one I want, and then start dimensioning. Okay? And even though I'm doing that, those still don't translate to the other floor plan. Okay? All right. Any questions about that? Okay. So 2 more things for tonight, but I think these will go pretty quickly. I want to talk about text notes and then text notes with leaders tonight, and I think we'll leave it at that. And then next time we meet, we're going to talk about placing views on sheets, how to print, and then I think probably at the beginning of class next time, we'll talk a little bit about how to use dimensions to help you draw better, right? So, all right, I'm going to go back to my level 1 floor plan, and we'll talk about text and leaders. And I think we're going to talk about text here first because it's just so easy in Revit, honestly. Again, this is one of those things in AutoCAD. It works, it's fine, right? But it's just kind of difficult. It's finicky. If you go to annotate again here, I have my text option right here. I'm going to click on that. And the way that text works in Revit is that I can click on the text command. I can click one time and I can start typing. Okay? When I'm done, I can hit close right here and I have text. Great. Simple single line text. Okay? I'm going to hit escape. I can also click on text. I can hold my mouse button down, drag a little box, and I can create, you see it's creating kind of a dimensional, let's see if I can get this to wrap here, right? It allows me to wrap now. Because I have sort of defined a beginning point and an end point for that text to be generated. If I had double clicked and just continued to create this text right here, let me double click in there. Because I just clicked, it wouldn't allow me to stop until I hit enter, right? But it doesn't allow a boundary on that other end, okay? All right, so I click on text. A few things I want you to notice. I have, some alignment type options. These are just like Word, right? Just like Word. So I have my align left, align center, align right, align at the bottom, right, center, or the middle, and then the top align. So I can choose whatever alignment I want. Okay. I can click and just start typing, or I can create a text box and start typing. Great. You're going to notice, hey, what kind of text do I want to create? Right? Do I want a 1/4 inch Arial, 3/32 inch Arial? So I have a couple of different text styles that I have over here, or text types that I can choose from. Okay. And I can draw my little box here. 1, enter, 2, 3, 4, right? And that 1/4" aerial, it's a 1/4" printed, of course. It functions just like dimensions, right? So I don't really care about what size it is as it's drawn in my floor plan. But when it prints on a sheet, it's going to be a 1/4 inch tall, all right? Another thing you're going to notice as I'm typing here that wasn't available before is I have kind of a little text editor up here that appears in my ribbon, right? So if I select this text, let's take a good look at it. I can bold it. I can italicize it. I can underline it, right? I can add bullets or numbering or ABC or indent or change from lower to all caps or vice versa, right? So I can do subscript or superscript, but there's a lot of different things I can do to edit this text, right? Again, just like AutoCAD, just like Word. So I'm not going to go over all of these because I think most of you can word process, you know what all those functions mean, right? Okay, when I'm done, I can hit close and I'm finished with my text. Easy as that, okay? I'm gonna hit escape. If I want to edit my text, I typed a bunch of stuff, but I want to change something, I double click on the text dialog box. Click, click, and I'm back in there and I can edit things, right? 5, 6, 7. When I'm done, I come up here and I hit close. Okay, works really well, very easy. Text is very simple. Okay, things that we're going to use text for are going to be notes, right? So I can add notes in here, or if I wanted to add labels or description to the floor plan, I could do that as well. Okay. Text style, going to function just like anything else in Revit, right? You hear me say this 100 times, but it's true. If I wanted to create a new text style, let's make it really big, like an inch, all right? I'm going to click on Edit Type, duplicate it. See ya, yep. I'm going to duplicate it, rename it, redefine it, and then use it, just like any other wall type, okay? So I'm going to choose to duplicate, give it a new name, 1 inch, Century Gothic. Okay. And I'm going to edit this text size, 1 inch. Text font, Century Gothic. Okay. And now I have this gigantic text that is Century Gothic. Okay. One thing that you probably just noticed me doing was moving it, right? I could use the move, I could copy this, I can rotate text, I can do anything with text that I can do with anything else in Revit. But what's really nice about it is that if I click on my text box, just one click, I can click on this little drag and move it around. But not only can I move it around, if there's other text in my drawing, oh, look at that. It snaps and aligns with it. Really, really useful tool. Okay, so I can move my text around very easily. I can also, if I want, change my text box. So these little grips here, click, hold, and drag. Look how nicely that works, right? I can change the size of my text box. Okay, so even if I create some text and it's in this gigantic text box, I can thin it up or do whatever I need to do. Okay, so text, pretty easy. You can add text on a, well, we haven't done it yet, but we will next week, on a sheet, on a title block to print, or you can add it to the drawing space right here, right? Pretty easy. Any questions about text? Text kind of feeds into leaders very naturally because they are somewhat a part of the text command, okay? So if I click on my text box here, you're going to notice that I have the option to add some leaders here. All right, and a leader, just like I showed you in the booklet, a leader points to an object and describes it. All right, so if I have my text here and I want a leader, I can add a straight leader, click, and I get a little leader pointing here. I can remove that leader. I can add an arced leader. Remove that leader. Let me just show you a couple things here. I'm going to grab this text because that's so gigantic, it's making a tiny little leader. Add a leader, and I can drag it over very easily and point to different things that I want to point at. Okay, I can add a second leader on the same side. Let's point to this. Great. I can click on this text. I can add a leader on the other side. Looks great. Okay, I'm going to click on this text box again. You're going to notice that these leaders, you see how it's aligned at the top on this side, and on the other side it's aligned on the bottom. Right? So I have the ability to sort of change the alignment of these as well. If I click on the text, you notice that went to the center. If I do it over here, it goes to the center as well, right? This big text is getting in the way. So I can change how that alignment happens, however you want it to happen, right? I can change my text to go in the center. However I want it to align, I can do that, okay? So it's very user-friendly. Text is very user-friendly. Leaders are very user-friendly, right? It all just sort of is very easy to use. One thing I do want to point out is you're going to notice that I do have on my leader end, I have an arrow. The arrow is just a regular arrow. It's not a filled arrow, all right? I'm going to click on my text here. And even though I'm creating a leader, I do want to point out that I'm using a text style associated with it. So, you know, I don't really have if I wanted to create a new leader, I don't create a quote new leader type. I would just create a new text type and assign a leader to it, okay? So I've got my leader, but it doesn't have a little kind of filled arrow. I want to change that, okay? So while I have my text selected, I'm going to hit Edit Type. And you'll notice that one of the options, this is a little bit different when I have a leader associated with it. You notice I don't have all the text, every single text type option, right? But the leader arrowhead, instead of being a 30-degree angle only, I could change that to a filled 30-degree angle. I'm going to hit Apply. Did you see what happened there? Or if I want it to be something like a filled box, right? Or if I wanted it to be a dot, I could do that as well, right? So leader doesn't just mean arrow. You can mean a dot or a filled square, whatever you want it to be, okay? But leaders, usually when I use them, we're describing things, so I would click on text. I would click on like my leader there, make sure my text style is what I want, and I would point to something. Click, right? Come over here, click, wall, close. Okay, and maybe I want a straight leader. And you notice how when I hover out here, those potentially want to line up. AutoCAD, that doesn't happen. So nice right here, right? Well, again, right? Let's do the arced leader. Last wall. There we go, right? So we can point to different things. I can also copy, move, rotate these things, so I can grab that. If I wanted to copy it, I would click on copy. We'll do multiple copies. And if I'm creating notes down a wall, right, why do I need to make 50 liters when I can just come and copy them all the way down, drag that over to there, right? So annotation, very easy. And again, if I change the scale of the drawing, all of the annotation changes, right? Doesn't mean that I don't have to maybe alter things a little bit, right? Because the text did jump, it's bigger. I might have to make my dimensions, space them apart a little bit more, do something, right? But everything is the right size, okay? All right, any questions on text so far, annotation? All right, one more thing. This is very quick, I promise. Well, I think what we'll do is maybe go over this just a tiny bit again at the beginning of class next time, and then I'm going to show you how to put views on sheets and scale them and print them, okay? But final thing I want to show you today is tagging items, right? For those of you that have ever done a door schedule in AutoCAD, it's terrible. It takes a lot of time, a lot of coordination, and those of you that have added tags in AutoCAD using attributes, right? You know it's kind of it's not kind of cumbersome. It's cumbersome, right? And if you don't create them right the first time, then they don't function properly. It's just a pain in the neck. In Revit, excuse me, tagging has been made very simple, okay? I'm going to come over here to annotate again. We're in the annotate tab because we're annotating things in Revit. But I have tag by category. TG is the shortcut, which is, you'll just see me doing that, TG. I'm going to click on tag by category. And essentially what that means is by clicking on that is that whatever you hover over, Revit is going to sense what it is and apply the appropriately defined tag. So if it's a door, I hover and I get a door tag. If it's a wall, I hover and I get a wall tag. If it's a window, I hover and I get a window tag. Okay? I can uncheck my leader option here. And I hover over my object and I click. Hover, click. Hover, click. Hover, click. Hover, click. So easy, right? I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to click on that object. If I want to move it, I can move it. If I want to rotate it, I'm going to space bar while it's selected. Okay, very nice. I can move it to either side. Works really well. I can also change the value of it. So if I want this door to be number 10, enter, I can do that. All right. Revit, if you do have a duplicate one, like if I change this one to 10, it would say, hey, you already have that mark somewhere, you're duplicating it, are you sure? Okay, and I can still kind of overwrite it and say, yeah, I want 2 number 10s, that's fine, right? But it will at least warn me, okay? Now, the one kind of annoying thing about Revit is that you notice that it sort of started numbering these kind of at, well, it was weird numbering. I don't know why, well, I do know why that got 2A, but it will sequentially number things, but if you like number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you think, oh, I need to delete those, and then you start renumbering again fresh, it doesn't start over renumbering from 1 again. It'll start going 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, even though you deleted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So that is kind of an annoying thing, but on the other hand, it is very easy just to go back in here and type 1, right? Click on it, 2. I can click on this one, click again, 3. Click on this one, oops, click again, 04, right? So it is very easy to go in there and renumber them really quickly. And the nice thing about this, of course, I like to show off, if I rescale it, look what happens. They all jump very nicely to scale and everything looks wonderful. Spacebar, I can move it down to where I want it, right? It's very nice. Yep.
How can I change the size of the number inside the
Well, that gets a little bit more complicated, so you'd have to edit the family. But I think in general, I don't really change it, honestly. Are you worried because you think it's maybe a different size than like the dimension text?
because I did it at the assignment,
Uh-huh.
it was big for the way it is.
All right, so probably like it maybe looked like, let's say, like that. That is probably not so much to do with the fact that the text is too big, but that you have it scaled. Is that what the problem is? Yeah, so if you change it to like a quarter, it'll scale down. Did that work? See, easy, right? There you go. Okay. You can tag anything in Revit. You can tag floors and doors and windows and walls and skylights and plants and furniture and accessories and wall base. Anything that your little heart desires, you can tag in Revit. And when you get a little bit more advanced, the nice thing about tagging items in Revit is that you can then schedule them. And that's kind of the real beauty in Revit, is scheduling items, right? So this information, by tagging it with a number 2, right? Now that door is number 2. And when you schedule it, Revit goes and says, hey, there's door number 2. I'm going to put you in the schedule, all right? So I'm going to very quickly, one more thing, and then we'll call it a night. But I'm going to create another new schedule here. And I will do a door schedule, and we will choose the mark, and we will choose the height. Let's see. height, width, there we go. Okay. And a schedule is generated. So here are all the marks, and if there's a height associated with it, it would schedule in here, right? This is a mess because we haven't tuned it, but of course it does count every single door in your project, which is half the battle, right? All right. Any questions so far? Okay. Well, I'm going to stop there for tonight. Quick. Oop.